Right now we have with us from the Sun-Times investigative reporter Chris Fusco, and he wrote a story yesterday in their series there, The Watchdogs. IHSA's top exec pay package rose 24% in 1 year. And Chris, they've been under fire for a long time. Tell us how you got onto this story, and is just a continuing follow-up of the IHSA?
Yeah, last year the Illinois House passed a resolution by a slim margin to examine IHSA operations. And one of the things that they originally set out to do was, kind of explore whether the State Board of Ed should take over the IHSA. That raised an outcry and kind of led to this series of hearings, one of which was very raucous about IHSA operations. So at last check, the legislature isn't looking to take them over, but that prompted us to start to examine what little material they make public. And that kind of led to this series of stories and the examination that we've been doing, and this is a follow-up on that.
And I find it very interesting that today the IHSA sent out a news release that they announced the hiring of a new executive director, Craig Anderson, who will take over January of 2016. And they do have a meeting scheduled, the board of directors, on next week on the 15th. Do you think that has anything to do with your article coming out by any chance?
I couldn't begin to tell you. They had announced Marty Hickman's retirement some time ago. One of the issues here that we have kind of been going back and forth with them on is that our stories that we've been doing are based on numbers that they file that are filed with the IRS. That's basically the only look we can get into what they're doing. Because they are a private not-for-profit organization and they are not subject to the state's Freedom of Information Act. So the pattern with these stories the past couple years has been they report numbers, we report their numbers, then they come back the next day or sometime later and say, our reporting of their numbers is inaccurate because these are actuarial calculations and don't reflect reality. Then that leads you in a position of, well, could we get the records to back up your numbers? And because they're not subject to the Freedom of Information Act, we can't. So that's kind of been the pattern with these stories.
And they did send out a Twitter like a couple hours later saying exactly what you just said, too, yesterday.
Yeah, and that's, and believe me, we reported, and I guess in fairness to them and in fairness to us, they reported what we reported. This huge rise in deferred compensation for Mr. Hickman is some sort of accrued service cost that does not represent cash wages. That said, it's still their number, and we reported this deferred compensation with numerous other not-for-profits that we've reported on, and at least I have not, nor has anybody, and my colleagues in the newsroom, heard anybody ever kind of raising complaints or concerns about us reporting deferred compensation numbers as compensation. So, this is one of these things that any way you slice it, Marty Hickman's pay of over a base salary of over $200K places him in an elite category of public education employees. The key difference for the IHSA is even though this organization kind of relies on public school members and public school facilities, and most definitely public school athletes, it's not subject to have its records available to the public. And I guess that's the issue here. If they would turn over the $593,000 in pension payments that they make every year, if they would turn over details about who manages the $9.3 million pension fund, which is on top of their annual budget of about $11 million, we'd like to see those things. We don't know that there's anything wrong about what they're doing, but it's a lot of money, and it's a lot of money made on the backs of high school athletes.
Yeah, I looked up deferred compensation, and there's a lot of ways you can do that and kind of hide it in the series. And also, in their retirement, they also have, like, the last 2 years. I know that some of the states do that, where if you make more money, you get more compensation. Is that part of the whole package, do you think, Chris?
It's hard to say. I mean, they have been contributing hundreds of thousands of dollars a year into these 3 different retirement plans. The pension plan got frozen in 2008 because it was getting too costly. they started some sort of second deferred compensation plan for employees who had been covered by the pension plan. And then you've got a 401k for other employees, which I'm sure maybe the other employees who are covered by the pension plan might be able to contribute to on their own. So, there's just a lot of questions. I mean, what was the internal documentation or reasoning behind the bids from Peoria, Champaign, Hoffman Estates for the state boys basketball tournament that was losing money? We don't have those. I think the Champaign News Gazette did a story about what Champaign submitted, but how does that compare to Peoria's? I don't know. What did the Sears Center give them? I don't know. There's just a lot of questions about how they do business, and I fully expected them to put out a statement, whatever, in response to our story, saying, the numbers that we report don't reflect reality, but it's still the IHSA's financial reporting, which was why we posted their own documents online with the story to show people that we weren't pulling this number out of thin air.
I know you do a lot of investigative reporting on all kinds of things in the state of Illinois and things. Do you think that they're just hiding behind this nonprofit, and that nonprofit tool is really not something that a association should be under, maybe?
Well, we looked at this issue in other states last year, and many states do require their high school athletic associations. They are beholden to that particular state's open records or sunshine law, for lack of a better term, kind of on the basis that they perform a quasi-governmental function, right? They make decisions regarding eligibility and rules for high school sports, whether it's a public school or a private school. In Illinois, we do not have that law in place. Now, the Better Government Association, the watchdog group out of Chicago, sued the IHSA in the wake of our story, saying, hey, you do perform a governmental function. You should be subject to the same open records laws that the State Board of Ed and school districts and governments are. But that suit recently was dismissed in Cook County Circuit Court. The BGA is appealing, but I would say, I'm not a lawyer, but the way I understand the law is that not-for-profits, when you're incorporated this way, when you look at how that jives with Illinois law, the IHSA is right. It doesn't have to disclose these things. So, given the mess in Springfield, I can't see this being a front-burner issue that's going to require them to be subject to FOIA. So in the meantime, I think we're just going to kind of get more of this status quo where you look at their filings, you can pull out their numbers, and they'll continue to not want to give out information beyond what's in those filings, and then they're going to basically say their own filings are wrong.
And you talked about other states, the reporting of income and expenses and all those things have been key issues in Louisiana, South Carolina, and Florida, where the legislature has really put the hammer down on them, and it has caused some changes in those associations. But you think with the way things are going in Springfield, we probably won't see that in Illinois?
No, Springfield is a mess right now. We've got a new governor that's sparring with an old legislature controlled by, Speaker Madigan, who's been there for years. I don't know how, given the financial hole that they're in, and in complete fairness to the IHSA, they are an organization that lives within their means. They take in and they spend, what they get. I guess the question is, given their revenue sharing models, and probably decisions that were made years ago that led to quite a bit of money going out the door every year for pensions and retirement benefits, is the organization being run in a way where it's fully benefiting tax-paying constituents. The members of the organization are very much in Marty Hickman's corner. There was tons of support last year for the IHSA at these legislative hearings, which one of which devolved into kind of a crazy shouting match.
Yeah.
But there's also geographic issues here too. In our reporting last year, we discovered that a lot of the Chicago coaches were seemingly upset about the way the boys basketball tournament was being run. That how could it be losing money where there's been this golden age of high school boys basketball? So there's some dissension within the ranks, but overall the IHSA enjoys widespread support from its athletic directors. And we're here just trying to. I think what we're in the business of is public information, and we see this as an organization that serves taxpayers, and we'd like to know more about what it does with public money.
Do you think, Chris, that the member schools care about all this? You mentioned Chicago and other areas. Or are they just happy something's getting taken care of and they don't have to worry about it because a lot of athletic directors and school officials are busy with other things?
Yeah, I think that's got something to do with it. I think there's some situations here where schools are running events and they're forking over the bulk of that money to the IHSA. I know they can keep concession revenue and stuff from it, but maybe they're satisfied with that. I think we quoted the Hinsdale Central Athletic Director saying, "Hey, this is our organization. If we feel there's something wrong with the revenue sharing model, we'll change it. Are these dollars big enough and significant enough generated from these events that they make a difference for high school athletics?" I don't know. Last I checked, every government that we report on and we look at is worried about money for
right.
extracurricular programs, money for supplies, money for equipment. Do these things affect that? It's going to take somebody from the membership ranks to speak up, and so far that really hasn't happened publicly, I don't think.
Now, when you talk to the IHSA, before I let you go here, does Marty Hickman or anybody directly talk to you, or do you have to go through
we tried to talk to them last year, and we did a little bit, and this time around, I put forth the offer to speak with them and speak with their accountants, and instead we went back and forth with, basically a short email exchange that took a while to complete, in which the IHSA basically, I think what would go a long way toward at least satisfying my curiosity would be to see the way the pension plan is being run. That's $9.3 million sitting there.
Yeah.
Who manages the pension plan? What kind of fees does it draw? Who are the recipients? When did they retire? How much money are they getting? These are all things we can get through teacher pension funds and school districts and the State Board of Education. If I don't know why I would, but if I want to see what the school secretary is being paid at a suburban or downstate public school district, I can file FOIA and get that information. If I want to see what Marty Hickman's assistant is being paid, I can't get that information because it's not a public body.
I know that in Mentor, Ohio, they just signed up for a deal in Ohio that they will put every check now online to show what they're spending expenses on. And this is not happening at all at the IHSA. And I guess the thing that upsets some of us that are following this is they say, don't worry about it, we're going to take care of it. Does that kind of concern you when you hear that stuff?
Well, this is a trend we've been seeing, in Chicago. Like, for example, the Chicago Convention and Tourism Bureau is a not-for-profit. It gets about $28 million in grants a year from the city of Chicago and the state of Illinois through various tax streams. That's public money going into a private not-for-profit that isn't required to tell you what they're doing with it and won't really tell you what they're doing with it beyond the IRS filing. The same thing goes with Navy Pier, the main tourist attraction in Chicago. That was once a division of the Metropolitan Pier and Exposition Authority, a government agency, and we could find out about its contracts and leases. That's since been taken as a not-for-profit. So, I kind of see the IHSA very similarly. While they argue that they don't get direct public support like those other two organizations I just cited do, they are revenue sharing with public schools. They are, public school employees are running tournaments for them and getting a share of that revenue. So, yeah, again, I'm sure maybe some of your listeners are sitting here saying, "Oh, those guys, they don't believe anybody," and these people are doing the right thing and they're doing right by high school athletes and doing right by taxpayers, but. We have a track record where we like to see the proof of that, and I think that's what these stories have been about is trying to see the proof that the organization is doing the good job that it says it's doing.
And the final question, does this compare to a lot of the political things you're seeing that happen in Illinois? Does it follow the same pattern, or is this just a high school sports thing?
I think it's probably more of a high school sports thing. I mean, I think this is an arena that obviously I don't play in on a day-to-day basis. I don't go out and cover games and report on sports. But what we do see is when there's resistance to turning over information, that's I think what's kind of driven this story a little bit. Every year now, 2 years running, we've asked to see the list of pension recipients and how much each collected. Every year we're told this is not information the IHSA is going to disclose. We ask them, is it possible by some weird confluence that when they shut down the pension plan in 2008, that some existing employees might be drawing pensions? Mm-hmm. That's information that's not going to be disclosed. Marty Hickman's employment contract would probably go a long way toward talking about his benefits and things down the road. We can't see that either.
Well, thanks so much, Chris, for taking time out. We've really enjoyed your articles and following what you guys do on the Watchdogs, and we'll keep updated with you if that's okay.
That's fine. Thanks for your time and your careful way of going about doing this.
We've been talking to investigative reporter from the Sun-Times, Chris Fusco. This is Dave Schmidt for the StatelineSportsHub.com.